Hello, internet friends. You don't know me, but I definitely know you. Andy didn't want to do this intro for Alex, so he strong-armed me, his darling wife, into doing it instead. This particular episode delves deep into the Netflix series Bojack Horseman and the Game of Thrones novels. So if you haven't caught up on it and you don't want to be spoiled, you have been warned. Thank you, and happy listening.
Hello, internet friends. Welcome to Love-Hate Relationship, a opinionated podcast by opinionated people. I'm Andy Boel.
And I'm Alex Ruiz, and as always, we're here to brighten your day, anger your soul, and tell you how to live your life, in that order. Now, Andy, before we got started, you told me that you were falling down a giant hole of David Bowie. I kind of want to know a little more about that.
I mean, okay. I only hesitate because this might turn into the love, and it's your turn for the love. But no, David Bowie is, to me, to call David Bowie a rock star or a pop star is like calling Batman a cop. It is such a limiting, boxing in term for maybe my favorite musical performer ever. I have always loved David Bowie ever since I found out we had the same birthday. At a very young age, I found out we were both born on January 8th, and that kind of intrinsically drew me to the man. But I remember watching him in Labyrinth, and I remember my dad giving me the Changes Greatest Hits album, and I was sunk hook, line, and sinker. I regularly listen to Bowie. I regularly cry to certain Bowie lyrics. That was actually why I was talking on Twitter. He's got a line in Ashes to Ashes, which always really gets to me. And I don't even know if it's that impactful of a line, but when he sings, "I've never done good things. I've never done bad things. I never did anything out of the blue." I don't know why. That just pierces me. So I love David Bowie. I miss him so much, and I always get happy just reveling in him, but then melancholy that he's gone, and that's kind of where my headspace goes. I'm optimistically melancholy about life.
Oh, sweetie. I know what we're going to talk about today, so you talking about being melancholy about life is, oh dear.
Yeah, I guess that actually fits.
Oh yeah, no, that's I completely. By the way, everyone, I completely sprung that on Andy. He mentioned that to me before we started recording as a just, hey, this is how I'm doing. This is just something that I'm up to, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna spring that on him because that sounds like fun.
Yeah, there's there's wading into the shallow end of the David Bowie fandom, and there's being in the deep end of the David Bowie fandom, and I am in the Mariana Trench of the David Bowie fandom.
I enjoy that. If you were to put David Bowie up as a future love, I would certainly not have a single problem with that. Though, do expect me to ask you about the Thin White Duke era.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lock it in, people. Here's a preview. I don't know if it'll be our next love. I don't know if it'll be a super love, if I can find someone else to talk about it with us. But David Bowie is going on LHR. Okay.
And I would support a triple love special on David Bowie. I am all for that. Because, that attack on Robin Williams as a topic that we had last time, that was a blast, you know? And I feel like something like David Bowie gives us a lot to work with because there are so many problematic aspects to him, but he's just so damn good.
Yeah.
And wonderful and delightful, and there's so much awesomeness there, and I think that'd be okay. Let's mark this one down. That'll be. No, I'm serious. Let's put that one down for at some point. Clarion call. We'll see what we can figure out. I know we know David Bowie fans.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, I'm etching it in stone. I'm casting it in iron. David Bowie, 2018.
Jesus Christ. It's better than some prospects we've got.
Alex, do you want to tell the lovely people where they can find our show that they are listening to?
Yes. So for reference, everyone, I know that for all of you, the show's been out for a couple of months. For us, like 2 episodes are out. We're gearing up to release episode 3, and I now have places where I can say, go follow us. So you can absolutely search for us. It's just search Love Hate Relationship. We're on iTunes. We're on Google Play. We're on Stitcher. We're on TuneIn Radio, which I've mentioned this before. We are only on TuneIn Radio so that my mother can listen to us because it's the only radio app that she uses. I love you, Mom. I don't know if you're listening to this right now. I'm sorry about how much I swear.
Hi.
Not really, but I'm sorry. Andy says hi as well. We are also, we are technically on Spotify. I'm trying to get episodes updated on that. For some reason, Spotify takes a lot longer to update episodes than other stuff. Everything else takes 24 hours at the most.
Yeah.
Some of them only 8 or 10 or 12, but Spotify takes forever for some reason.
They're late to the podcast game.
Yeah, but I mean, you guys just whatever you listen. I listen to stuff on Stitcher because I'm a nerd. Some people, those of you who have iPhones or people who are Google aficionados the way other people are iPhone aficionados or Apple aficionados, just find us. We are available. We would love for you to listen to us.
Absolutely.
So subscribe. Yeah. So I got that out of the way kind of awkwardly because I didn't want to do it awkwardly at the end, but I did it awkwardly at the front. So you want to get started, Andy?
Yes, let's move into something that should be a little less awkward. I feel like we've got a lot to get through today. Even if this isn't one of our longest episodes, I think this is going to be our nerdiest because we've done a pretty good job in the past of balancing pop culture and something non-pop culture. And this time, I basically just decided that we were going to double down on the pop culture, but I'm excited for it. So Alex, without further ado, let's get into the love.
All right, so my turn to pick the love. And folks, for our love today, I have brought you the wonderful, the fantastic, the critically acclaimed, the excellent Bojack Horseman.
Yes.
So, little bit of back. Most of you, I assume, are probably at least passingly familiar with Bojack Horseman, even if you've never sat down and watched through all 4 seasons. As of the date of this airing, season 5 should be coming out in about 10 days. That'll be on my birthday, by the way, September the 14th. What?
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. I'll be 29. I'm a third of the way dead. So, quick overview, because I have a lot to talk about with Bojack Horseman. I have a very particular take, which is largely influenced by some YouTubers, but we'll get into that. But quick overview on Bojack Horseman. Well, actually, no, before the overview. Andy, you're a Bojack fan, correct?
Absolutely. I've seen every episode. I think, there's this trend of cartoons for adults that is kind of popular right now, and I think Bojack was one of the first, and it's one of the best. I am an absolute Bojack fan.
Wait, you think South Park's been around for 20 years?
Well, right. South Park was definitely was before its time in that regard, and I know, Adult Swim's been doing stuff for ages, but I'm trying to come up with other examples. It really seems like Bojack inspired cartoons for adults that make you sad.
I could see that. So, Bojack Horseman was created by Raphael Bob Waxberg and premiered on Netflix back in 2014. It is an animated black comedy following the titular character, who was voiced by Will Arnett, a former 90s sitcom actor struggling through depression, addiction, severe nostalgia, narcissism, and self-destructive tendencies, among other issues. The show's universe also, if the thumbnails have ever confused you, if you've never seen the show's universe includes anthropomorphic animals who kind of move through the world in pretty much the same capacity as humans. And when I say, it's just not commented on. Sometimes they create jokes or puns. I'm sure we'll discuss a few of those, Andy. But generally speaking, animals these anthropomorphic humanoid animals are basically treated the same way. Not exactly the same way. An imperfect comparison would be to say that they are like other races.
Yeah, I would agree
of
with
people.
That. You know, the undersea ones have their own community, and it's not like they're second-class citizens or anything. The in-show universe just had animal people that come up at the same time.
Yeah, one of the characters, Mr. Peanut Butter, voiced by the incomparable Paul F. Tompkins, is from a place called... He's a Labrador Retriever. He's from an area called the Labrador Peninsula, which is just populated with Labradors just all over the place. This is the kind of setups and situations you often have. So Bojack is a horse. Other characters involved, Amy Sedaris voices his on-again, off-again girlfriend / manager or agent, Princess Carolyn, who is a Catwoman. He has his layabout best friend / roommate, Todd, who is voiced by Aaron Paul for all of the Breaking Bad fans out there.
Yeah, bitch! Magnets! Oh!
You have Mr. Peanut Butter, who we mentioned, who's kind of just a dim-witted oaf, but really adorable and wonderful. You have Diane.
Diane Nguyen, who is...
voiced by Allison Brie.
That's right.
Who is...
Mr. Peanut Butter's
I guess
wife. I mean, by the second season, they get married.
Yeah, girlfriend / wife. She is a confidant of Bojack's.
She's a writer in L.A., so she goes through the myriad of jobs that L.A. writers have. Like, she's Bojack's ghostwriter, and then she becomes a tweet ghostwriter, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a huge supporting cast of just random characters who come in for various stints, but that's kind of the core cast, right? Am I missing anyone from that core cast? I'm talking about throughout the show, not for like a particular season or something.
Yeah. No, really, that's about it. Everyone else, the next biggest players in the show are come in on a season by season basis, or are like more character players in the overall story. But no, that's the main cast.
Yeah. So obviously it's really hard to talk about Bojack Horseman significantly for anyone who hasn't really watched the show, but Andy, I kind of wanted to just, take a few minutes and just talk to you about what some of your favorite character stories or individual episodes or characters in general from the show are, just to kind of give an idea of this universe. That could be main core characters, expanded cast, particular episodes or storylines or things that they play with.
Yeah, I think that's a delightful idea. And I do want to say, I think that this is a pretty broad, or not broad, but I think a lot of people know the show and know what we're going to talk about. Bojack came out in 2014, and that was like the year that Netflix was pumping out like House of Cards and Bojack and there was one other, but like it's one of these shows that really helped cement Netflix as a content producer and let them get to where they are nowadays, where they can make summer blockbuster flops, and every third show is a Netflix show, and they have their nails in Marvel, and this was a cornerstone to the Netflix content empire. So I think it's very popular.
Yeah.
But when I think of Bojack, it's a very dark black comedy. It's very melancholic. It's about watching people destroy themselves. At least that's like how I would classify it. But for all of that, it is very funny, and some of my favorite stuff includes like the animal puns. The writing is impeccable. In episode 2, you get Neil McBeal, the Navy SEAL, who's voiced by Patton Oswalt, and gets in a grocery store altercation with Bojack, and when he gets stressed out, he starts seal barking. Stuff like you have Lenny Turtletop as a turtle, Quentin Tarantulino,
voiced by J.K. Simmons, who is incredible.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh,
yes,
I love him even more now. Quentin Tarantulino, the Pinky Penguin, who is the representative from Penguin Publishing. Like the writing is so silly and funny, but does it so well. You know, there's one of the later main characters is Ralph Stilton, who is a mouse who is romantically involved with Princess Carolyn, and when he proposes to her, he asks, would you with a mouse? Like stuff like that is really silly, but it's also really funny. My favorite joke in all of BoJack is it's not even a big thing, but you have to be paying attention. There's a part where one of those double-decker buses is going through Hollywood, and it's clearly supposed to be like a tour of a tour of Houses of the Stars, but on the bus it's written tour of famous YouTubers' houses. And it's making fun of how it seems like YouTubers are the only ones moving to LA anymore. And that's so funny to me.
Yeah, no, I love that. You mentioned Penguin Publishing. So I just got done. I had watched the entire series, and I rewatched it, showing it to Stephanie for the first time. Listeners, Stephanie Renee Johnson, who was our guest on last episode.
Join with Jake and the Neverland Pirates.
She and I watched through the entire thing, and like she really latched onto that Penguin Publishing joke. Like, Penguin Publishing is populated entirely by penguins. By the way, Penguin Publishing is regularly just like going down the tubes throughout that entire season. Like the book agent, who again is a literal penguin, is talking about how like he and his family are like getting ready to live inside of a box, and they're waiting on BoJack's book because it might be the only chance they have to save the organization. So I mean,
right, and the idea of hinging your hopes on BoJack for anything is funny in its own right. My other favorite thing, and then I'll happily turn the table to you. A recurring bit through the show is BoJack is friends with Margot Martindale, who a lot of people might know from Justified, and she's in a huge thing in the show. She's commonly referred to as character actress Margot Martindale.
Like they literally refer to her as that all of the time.
Right, and she is, in canon, the woman Margot Martindale, but she's also like a psycho and a bank robber, and like steals a boat and crashes it into a tanker.
Beloved character actress Margot Martindale is in police custody tonight for her role in a failed bank robbery.
And like that's the wackiness. This is still a cartoon, for as much as it has its inflective, deep moments, and as much as it has its totally messed up moments, it's still a cartoon. It still is wacky, serious, non-serious stuff.
Yeah, and we'll get into those deep moments, but some of my favorite just random things that they do, and they're not random per se, but you can tell, like, I try to picture the writer's room of Bojack Horseman regularly, and it's so... I don't know where someone comes up with some of these ideas. Guys, J.D. Salinger has an arc on this show. Actual real-life author, actual real-life deceased author. They posit that J.D. Salinger faked his own death. They discover, like, he gets discovered and convinced to come to Hollywood, called Hollywood at the time, for a canonical reason, because Bojack steals the D from the Hollywood sign, and then for the rest of the show, everyone refers to it as Hollywood, and no one questions it. But J.D. Salinger fakes his death, is discovered, comes to Hollywood to pitch a TV show, and everyone's thinking like he's going to pitch a giant like Catcher in the Rye style Rye commentary on existence, and he pitches a game show where celebrities answer trivia questions.
Celebrities, do they know stuff?
I think it's called Hollywood Stars and Celebrities. Do they know? What do they know? Do they know things? Let's find out.
Right.
That is the title of his show, and he treats it like a high art masterpiece. And it's the most ridiculous thing you can possibly imagine, and it's wonderful. Like, just it sounds stupid when I say it aloud, but if you're invested in this show from the beginning, you don't really question it. They build this universe so cleanly and so perfectly that all of this ridiculosity just kind of fits together and you buy in. It's not a show you can really jump into. It was really made for that Netflix binge model.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is such a credit to the writers' room that like they keep the running joke of Hollywood just becomes Hollywoo for pretty much the entirety of the show. I think he steals the D in season 1, and in season 5 it's still Hollywoo. Anytime the humpback reporter whale is
played by Keith Olbermann,
played by
the way.
Keith Olbermann, and he is the LA news anchor. Anytime he's doing a report, if you pay attention and if you pause and you look at like the bylines growing across the stage, it's always something nonsensical and wacky and insane. Amy Sedaris, to her credit, pulls off increasingly insane tongue twisters that like I'm not even going to attempt to do.
To prepare the press release. Portnoy finds joy in hoi polloi boy toy.
But like they're funny and goofy and silly and wacky, and I think the show,
you can YouTube smash cuts of them and they are just fun to watch,
right?
Just in general,
absolutely. And I think the show needs that to balance out the rest of it.
Yeah. Other things that I really just like appreciate, Mr. Peanut Butter is wonderful. I will probably talk about Mr. Peanut Butter a lot in the latter section of this, but I love Paul F. Tompkins. I could listen to Paul F. Tompkins, narrate somebody eating a bowl of Cheerios. Like, honestly, he's wonderful, and his performance is Mr. Peanut Butter is this character who, I think it's the 3rd season, he runs for governor of California and triggers a special election by challenging the incumbent governor to a ski race. And he doesn't know, Mr. Peanut Butter does not know how to ski. And his whole premise for doing this is he kind of wants people to like him. Like, he realizes that he's kind of good at public speaking, and it's a running joke that Mr. Peanut Butter kind of, because he's just a nice, charming guy, falls ass backward into a bunch of success. Yeah. And then afterwards, when he just kind of realizes, oh, I don't think I actually want to be governor. That doesn't sound like fun. You know what? You can be governor. It's totally fine with me. In fact, I'll help you get elected because my ex-wife, Jessica Biel, is now running for governor. Which, by the way, Mr. Peanut Butter's ex-wife is Jessica Biel in this show, and Jessica Biel eats Zach Braff at one point.
Yeah, I was going to say Jessica Biel has her own arc, but that works too.
Yeah, no, it's... And again, like, if you've never seen the show, it sounds like I'm describing something truly just incomparably stupid and silly. But in universe... holy shit, it works. Like, it really freaking works.
Yeah, I think it's easy to buy into, and once you're bought in, you're willing to accept the insanity of everything.
Yeah.
To the show's credit, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, this show tackles some really dark themes, and I think this might be a good spot to kind of transition into some of that. It always does it with some comedy, though admittedly in like the last season, there are a couple of episodes that are, how should I put this, traumatizing?
Yeah, there's some...
kind of traumatizing?
There's some messed up shit. Like, what... I think it does it kind of for jokes in the first couple of seasons, but by season 3 and 4, once it... You know the show is going to drop a hammer, and it keeps managing to make that devastatingly impactful. We didn't talk about any of the main characters in you talked about Mr. Peanut Butter, but we didn't talk about any of the other characters in our love because they are all so broken, destructive people that are finding just newer and newer ways to completely ruin their lives. Yeah. So do you want to get into some of those?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so in descending order, I mean, you watch a character like Todd. Todd, amazingly, is one of the few examples I've ever seen of an openly asexual character on television.
Right.
And Todd is constantly struggling with it. And Todd, much like Mr. Peanut Butter, is kind of the dim-witted oaf character. But, you do see him struggle with the idea that Bojack betrays him at one point. He is dealing with a very awkward sexuality that he doesn't really have the language or education to understand. The first time someone calls him an asexual, he thinks he's being insulted.
Yeah, and they managed to really take a character who quite literally sat around not doing much of anything for a while and delve into giving Todd an actual character, and I think making him Ace was a great way to do that, and it becomes not like a stereotypical defining feature of him, but it becomes a massive struggle for him for a while, and then he gets over it and moves on to the next thing and accepts his own asexuality and is able to
and he
move
starts
on.
going to ace support groups, and at the end he meets a person who asks him out specifically because he's ace and she's ace, and she reads him. She reads that he's ace, and she's like, I'm ace too. Here's my card. I'm asking you out. Give me a call anytime you're ready for it. Like, that's the end of his storyline, and at the end of the last season. So we're assuming that'll get picked up again next season. But like, that's a really meaningful thing to kind of watch him struggle through.
Yeah.
You see Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane specifically, like, their marriage is fascinating because Mr. Peanut Butter is always this kind of dim-witted, happy-go-lucky guy who, admittedly he has dark moments where he realizes that not everyone has a philosophy like his. He has to deal with the potential of his brother dying at one point when he finds out his brother's sick. But also, his marriage is so tenuous because Diane is constantly dealing with this existential angst where she doesn't understand why it doesn't matter how successful she is professionally. It doesn't matter how good the day-to-day life of her marriage is. She can't be happy. She just can't. And it's not like clinical depression. It's like
a dissatisfaction.
Yeah, and Diane is constantly coded as being this hyper-intelligent person who recognizes, Diane is very woke. Diane comes from a very difficult family background. Like, she was the single daughter of a slew of Bostonian boys who treated her like shit.
Yeah.
Who honestly just tortured her for their own amusement. And there's an episode where you meet all her brothers, and yeah, they're kind of horrible.
It's nice that years later we can all laugh about this.
Yep, my therapist thinks the same thing.
They expect her to do everything for them. Like, her father dies, and she goes to pay her respects, and they con her into basically planning the whole funeral, which they decide not to even attend without telling her, because they just decided that, it'd be better if they just, watched a ball game instead, that's what their dad would really want. And you see that it's not just in Diane's imagination. She had a horrible childhood, and she has this angst about what her purpose in life is, and that's a theme that the show really dives into. And I don't want to go into that immediately because I do want to mention Princess Carolyn's arc, which I think is heartbreaking, because she is a workaholic who kind of wakes up in her own middle age and realizes that she's wasted most of her life, quote unquote, on a terrible relationship with Bojack a lot of the time. She was his on-again, off-again girlfriend for, 15 years, I think they say. The only thing that seems to give her any joy is being a workaholic, but she also ostensibly wants a family and doesn't know how to have a healthy relationship. And, the thing with... And she gets pregnant and suffers a couple of miscarriages on the show. And it shows this. It shows her dealing with it. And she's at the point, because she's also had several miscarriages before the show, she's very businesslike about it almost. And it's tragic to watch.
Yeah, at the end, like her relationship with Ralph, he is such a understanding person for the most part. It really kind of gift wraps a potential happiness for her, and she turns it down. There are some extenuating factors that, without getting too much into the lore of the show, there are a couple of reasons, but I really feel like the Princess Carolyn is so tragic, especially in this last season, because she had the opportunity for real happiness as she perceived it, and at the last moment, at the midnight hour, threw that all away and decided to dive headfirst back into work and becoming a manager again. And the thing that she spent 3 seasons griping and grousing and hating, and then feeling like, no, this is the only way I can be happy, is to be this person.
And the biggest example of this kind of deep dive into these dark emotions is Bojack himself.
Yes.
Obviously.
The piece de resistance.
Yeah. So Bojack has several arcs throughout the show. There's one season where it's all about him getting his memoir written, and Diane very much paints this portrait of him that's very real, and he doesn't know how to handle it because he's kind of coasted through life on the narcissism of his own celebrity, because he was famous in the 90s, and he still got money from that, and he still got fame from that, and he's still, fostering relationships from that and partying from that, and the rug gets ripped out from under him. He gets a movie. He gets his dream movie role to play
his childhood hero, Secretariat.
Yeah, and it's kind of destroyed around him, and he can't handle that. He can't handle the fact that when it's not exactly the way he wants it, and it doesn't give him the gratification, it doesn't naturally give him the meaning in life that he wants, he shuts down about it. There's a season of where he gets an Oscar campaign for that same movie, and he thinks that giving an Oscar will give his life meaning, and spoiler alert, it super doesn't, at all. And the quest throughout the show...
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, he... Throughout the show, we see him consistently run away from his problems, consistently leave town with no notice for months at a time to try and go find happiness, screw up that happiness where he is. The absolute darkest moment of the show, in my opinion, is when he tracks down an old love interest of his, Charlotte, who was his best friend's girlfriend back in the day, but they had sparks. He tracks down Charlotte in New Mexico, kind of imposes himself to live with them for a couple of months, puts the moves on Charlotte, and when he's turned down, then puts the moves on Charlotte's daughter, and gets caught, and gets a shotgun pointed at his face and gets told, get the fuck out of my house, by somebody who was, one of the most important people in his life.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't know if I'd call that the darkest. I think season 4 probably has the darkest moments as we dive into his family history.
Well, sure, yeah.
But that's it's honestly just shades of black at that point, because
and he keeps finding he keeps finding ways to add another coat of paint to that. That is the worst thing. Bojack is constantly falling down a bottle, and then some miraculous cartoonish chain of events happens to bring him back up. And by season 5, we just know that he is going to keep falling down, and it is going to keep being a problem.
Yeah. Now, in the best interest of time, because I see we're 35 minutes in
I told you this would be a long one.
It's all good. I wanted to get to the point that I really wanted to talk to on this, and I owe a debt of gratitude to I want to shout them out, Wisecrack, the YouTube channel, which offers philosophical dissections of various media, including movie and TVs. They have a couple of videos about Bojack Horseman, and in particular, there's one where they called The Philosophy of Bojack Horseman, where a lot of this discussion, a lot of what I'm about to talk about comes from. So I want to give them full shout-outs. I'll link to them in the show notes. But the thing that really hooks me about Bojack Horseman is its portrayal of the philosophy of existential nihilism, which is a philosophy that I find incredibly interesting, and is a lot of the basis for a lot of my personal philosophy. So very quickly put, the irresponsibly short explanation of existential nihilism and absurdism is that life itself carries no inherent meaning. The term is literally existence precedes essence. You are born before you have purpose. We're born with no inherent purpose, and so we have to devise one for ourselves. Absurdism, which is a certain branch of this kind of philosophy, argues that most of us live our lives distracted by questions of survival or pleasure or the material world. But that once we have the time and intelligence to face it, our choices, once we see the inherent meaninglessness of life, that all those distractions just fail to keep us from noticing before, we basically have three choices. We can kill ourselves, we can embrace religion or go back to our distractions. And absurdist philosopher Albert Camus, who I won't go into great detail on, he called this philosophical suicide. Or we, quote, embrace the absurd, and we choose to live and be happy in spite of the realization. His metaphor for this was the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus rolls a boulder up a mountain. Every day it rolls back down. He repeats the process. Sisyphus becomes the absurd hero the day that he decides, I have to subject myself to this meaningless task, this meaningless existence day in and day out. I will choose to be happy in spite of the fact that this is all meaningless bullshit that I shouldn't have to deal with, but it's all that I have. When he embraces the absurd, Sisyphus becomes the absurd hero. And a lot of us kind of want Bojack to be the absurd hero here, although I don't know that we necessarily do. And this philosophy is all throughout Bojack Horseman. When you think about distractions, Bojack, Princess Carolyn, and Todd are all constantly seeking distractions in work, or in relationships, or in substances, to avoid that existential angst. How many times does Todd say, when someone comes up with a harebrained idea, or Todd comes up with a business idea, he goes, "Hooray! A task!" or just something to distract himself with. And Princess Carolyn's constant work, and Bojack's substance abuse. Bojack and Diane are constantly trying and failing to achieve happiness and meaning through their professional successes. Diane, it doesn't matter how many books she writes. It doesn't matter if Bojack wins an Oscar. Life remains meaningless. Happiness eludes them. Diane's marriage is wonderful, but she doesn't know how to be happy. And everything fails to give them meaning. Mr. Peanut Butter and Todd are arguably too stupid to confront the angst, except when they're absolutely forced to, which could potentially make them heroes of the absurd, but they also are constantly distracting themselves. Mr. Peanut Butter is happy to work with Todd on these schemes, to run for governor so that people will love him, which is exactly the kind of stunt you expect from Bojack. You know, and the show nails this philosophy over and over and over again. It's that it never matters what any of these characters do. Life continues to remain meaningless. They continue to fail to achieve the happiness they want because they are too intelligent to not notice what's going on. It's kind of a post-religion area, the LA of Bojack Horseman. Like, there's not really any religious philosophy there to offer the kind of distractions that Camus talked about. So what are they left with? They're left with their own existential misery, really.
Yeah.
And this philosophy is very meaningful to me. And the fact that I see it, like, portrayed right here on this TV show is so poignant and powerful. And yes, it's very depressing, especially if you don't ascribe to the idea of existential nihilism or absurdism. But it's so powerful for me to just watch that in a show that is hugely popular.
Yeah, you know, we've kind of danced around this before. Millennials and millennial culture and the young people of today, I think, are becoming increasingly nihilist. There is it's become a meme in itself at this point, for people to be like, memes are the only thing keeping me going. To poke fun at these silly picture distractions being the only thing that make life worth living has in itself become a meme. And I think I was not familiar with this philosophy. I was not familiar with the absurdism.
It's not exactly taught in public high school. This is crap I learned all on my own years after I finished formal education.
Sure. But to hear you and to hear Wisecrack talk about this in relation to the show, it's overwhelmingly obvious that the writers had this viewpoint in mind while writing it, and they wanted to put it out into the world. And I don't have a problem with that by any means.
I do want to emphasize that in both existential nihilism and absurdism, as well as in Bojack Horseman, things are not hopeless. It's sure, a lot of these episodes end on tremendous down notes. Horrible down notes. It's an incredibly sad, depressing show. But I feel like and having just rewatched the entire series, I feel like at the cap of all this, there's always this hope. And it's a hope that exists in absurdism and existential nihilism, which is we do have the freedom to create our own sense of meaning, to find happiness and create it for ourselves. Yeah. The problem is when we try and find it in these meaningless distractions and we don't just embrace the inherent meaninglessness and decide to forge our own purposeful meaning. Bojack offers that a lot of the time. It's just a matter of who takes up on it and who doesn't.
And who can stick with it, I mean, Bojack, for all the times he falls down, has picked himself up at the end of every season. And I was talking about how at this point it seems hopeless to assume that he would ever actually find happiness, but the show keeps positing the notion that he can. And I think there is something hopeful in that. I think that is a hopeful message for as broken as these people are, they are able to pick themselves back up and life keeps going on.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a message within the philosophy. Existential nihilism should not be treated as this giant, this reductive, depressing, hyper-depressing hopelessness. That's what cosmic nihilism is, and that's what you watch Rick and Morty for.
Yeah!
Which is the subject of another Wisecrack video where they compare the cosmic nihilism of Rick and Morty and the existential nihilism of Bojack. And really it does kind of come down to hope, We are meaning-seeking creatures, as are the characters in this show. And as such, with the ability to create that meaning, there is hope. There is a chance at happiness. You just have to, take that leap of faith to pursue it. I feel like Todd is kind of closing in on that, especially because we're now a season and a half away since the last time Todd has lived with Bojack. Like, he saw Bojack once in the last season, and he straight up tells him, I haven't seen you in a year, and that's kind of been working for me. Todd takes control of his own happiness, or at least he takes a step towards it, and that's exceedingly hopeful. Princess Carolyn kind of dances around it back and forth, and we'll see what ends up happening with that. But I feel like she seems to be inching towards that's a sense of meaning and happiness. Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter take a step backward from where they were the last couple of seasons. So I'll be really interested to see where their arc goes in the next season. And Bojack's just fucking up and down constantly. But by the end of the last season, he suddenly discovers that he has more family, and family that he really truly cares about.
Yeah, Hollyhock.
I'm not going to spoil how the whole Hollyhock thing goes, because that is actually, even though the season came out over a year ago, I highly encourage. It's such a good revelation that I highly recommend anyone who hasn't seen it go for it. But suffice it to say, Bojack has some additional meaningful relationships that he can continue to foster, even though he's destroyed. He's destroyed his relationship with Todd. He's rectifying his relationship with Princess Carolyn. Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter are always kind of there, kind of not. He's that's been back and forth. But the point is, there's room for hope in these characters, and there's room for hope in this philosophy. And if you watch Bojack Horseman, you'll understand this philosophy. You'll understand me a little bit better. I promise you. I really wanted to kind of use this show. I love this show on its own merits, but I did also really want to use it as this jumping off point to talk about this particular philosophy. And I
think it's great.
talked about it extensively. So, that is my love. Bojack Horseman. I highly recommend it to each and every one of you. If you have a Netflix subscription or if you can steal one, please watch it. 4 seasons, 5th season comes out September the 14th.
It's worth binging.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, straight up.
No, yeah, thank you, man. This was a big part of what LHR was always supposed to be in my mind, is taking a thing and really delving into it and breaking it down and talking about what it means to us. So I think this was a great example of that.
45 minutes later.
The other thing LHR is for letting us crack our heads open and do some hate rants, and I've got one today.
All right, let's get into it.
All right, so my hate for this episode is the author George R.R. Martin. For anyone who doesn't know, he is the man who wrote Game of Thrones. He is the reason HBO has what is going to go down as one of the greatest TV shows of all time, and I hate his Santa ass for the fact that I have to talk about Game of Thrones as the TV show before the book series. So let me get Go ahead. Yeah. Let me get into this. My core hatred for George R.R. Martin is the notion I have that he is a lazy, greedy bastard who decided to stop working on the thing that made him famous because a newer, shinier thing came along. And I am, of course, talking about the Song of Ice and Fire book series, aka Game of Thrones.
Sure.
I'll skimp on the history lesson a little bit. The man was born in September 1984 in New Jersey, and his childhood was very closed off and isolated, so he read a lot, and he had this real voracious imagination and a wanderlust and loved books. And he nurtured that love of books and became a writer. He became a writer and started pushing out sci-fi novels back in the 70s, but the problem was that they were all critical failures. None of them were particularly good or particularly well received, so he started writing for TV. And a couple of his TV credits include the 1985 Twilight Zone remake TV show, Max Headroom, and this made me laugh, the Beauty and the Beast TV show that starred Ron Perlman.
This is where the wealthy and the powerful rule.
Do you remember that one?
Okay.
Where,
so that was before our time. That aired before I was even born, I'm pretty sure. But I have seen it in reruns. It is awful.
Ron Perlman has a lion face and lives in the sewers. It's so terrible. But anyway. Around 1991, George R.R. Martin hit a wall with this TV writing career and turned back to books. And he spent the next 5 years working on what would become Game of Thrones, the first Song of Ice and Fire novel. So that came out in 1996. It was supposed to be a trilogy, and the more he wrote, the more he literally wrote, where 3 books became 5, which have now become 7, and 5 of them are currently out. So I want to stress, the first book, Season 1 of Game of Thrones, pretty much, the book came out in 1996. And then his release schedule was 96, 99, 2000, 2005, and the last book came out in 2011. So there are still 2 books.
That 99 to 2000 is weird to me.
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure the story is he wrote the second and third books, and they were going to be 1 book, and it wound up being like 2,000 pages, so he just cut them in half and split them in the middle. That's how he was able to release 2 books in as many years. But you notice it then took him 5, then 6, and now it's 7, and it's going to be at least 8 years before the 6th book, The Winds of Winter, comes out. For whatever reason, the man has been taking longer and longer and longer to to push out his books, and these were very popular in their own right for select nerds well before the HBO TV show came out. So it's not like this wasn't already a legacy for him.
Yeah.
So it's taken him longer and longer and longer to write these books. Why is that? Well, the answer pretty obviously is the TV show. The Game of Thrones TV show was conceptualized in 2006, and season 1 aired in 2011, the same year as the 5th book. HBO has been pumping these out pretty regularly since then, and the 8th and final season of the show is coming out in fall of 2019, I believe. And so here's where we get into my problem. HBO knew how to stick to a schedule. HBO had to stick to a schedule because Game of Thrones blew up and became, the most popular product they have offered since maybe The Sopranos, and maybe it's past The Sopranos at this point. I was never a Sopranos guy, so I can't speak to that. I know everybody loves Game of Thrones, the TV show. Khaleesi is one of the most popular girl names of 2016, for Christ's sake. I knew that would get a laugh out of you.
All right.
So he stopped writing the books, and at this point, the show passed the books in terms of plot, in terms of what has actually happened in the story. The show surpassed the books 2 seasons ago. So
I heard about this.
Right. It surpassed the books. The plot moved on because HBO knew how to keep to a schedule and knew that they had time constraints. And George R. R. Martin basically said to the show writers of Game of Thrones, okay, here's the ending for everybody. Get them there how you will. And that really sticks in my craw. That really bothers me as a bookworm. That really bothers me as somebody who read all 5 of his books over the course of 6 months. I tore through them in college. Each of these books is 1,000 pages. This was a commitment on my part. And I was absolutely that guy who kind of stuck my nose up at the TV show as soon as it became clear that they were changing plot details, and really stuck my horse on the notion that George R. R. Martin was going to finish the books before the TV show ended, so that I have all the plot knowledge, and I know what's going to happen, and I know that, oh my God, he killed who? And George R. R. Martin burned me for that. He burned me good.
Burned you specifically. Andrew Richard Bowen.
He burned me specifically. He burned me, and he burned everyone else who was a dedicated Game of Thrones fan before the TV show. I really think that. The show is immensely popular. I can't talk to that enough. I think that I don't need to. I think it speaks for itself. It's going to go down with Lost and with as one of the most popular shows of all time. And George R. R. Martin, by my estimation, and this really isn't me telling tales out of class, he's in interviews basically said this in as many words. He stopped writing the books because it got too hard. And what wasn't too hard was instead becoming executive producer to the TV show and just letting other people do the work and telling the show writers, oh yeah, this and this happens, and then they go ahead and write it, and then they go ahead and film it, and he gets to go on Conan and do the late night talk show circuit, and he gets to laugh about how much sex is in the TV show, and he gets to there's this bit, I think it's Conan or it's one of the talk shows, he's talking to Alfie Allen, who is the actor who plays Theon, and he's really ribbing him about, oh man, enjoy all the sex scenes while you can, buddy, because we didn't know this at the time, but because I'm going to castrate your character and turn him into this tortured wretch for a season. And I'm sure that's a lot more fun than dealing with your publisher's deadlines. I'm sure that is a lot easier. The man is getting up there in age. I'm sure it's a lot better for his health, but I feel betrayed. And I think anybody who was a fan of the books has a right to feel betrayed. Compared to some of the other fantasy giants, compared to Robert Jordan, who is the guy who wrote The Wheel of Time, Robert Jordan pumped out a book every 2 or 3 years until he died. And the story wasn't over when he died, but he left the manuscript for other people to continue doing this. So the man, every 2 or 3 years for like 20 years, pumped out a Wheel of Time book. They're just as big as the Game of Thrones books.
Yeah, my dear friend David. Hey David, how's it going? Is I think still a huge Wheel of Time fan, and I remember him like pushing Redwall on me back in like middle school, I think.
Oh, Redwall.
Yeah, he's a huge fan of that particular series. He still talks about it actually. But yeah, okay, I'm familiar with that.
And the Wheel of Time, it's great. It's maybe not as infamous as Game of Thrones, but I would think that it is just as important to people and has just as much of an epic fantasy scope. Or compare it to Brian Jacques, who pumped out so many Redwall books, and those were a little smaller and more intended for children, but that doesn't change the fact that the man was able to keep writing them and keep coming up with stories, and he didn't have to split his book in half because it was getting too long.
Okay. Sorry, my bad. I thought Redwall was one of the Wheel of Time books. I have never read these. I'm not a fantasy guy, but like that's my bad.
Redwall. Okay, so no, I'm going to school you real quick. Redwall is a series of maybe like 25 books, and they're all about these slightly anthropomorphic woodland critters, and it's basically set in medieval England. So it's mice and hares and badgers who live in a castle and have a sword that is the equivalent to Excalibur, and they're constantly fighting rats and bobcats, and it's great. Redwall is thank you, David, for reminding me of Redwall. Shit, Redwall got me through middle school, man. Okay. So Brian Jacques' Redwall series, Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. I'm a huge fan of R.A. Salvatore and the Dritz Duerden Forgotten Realm books, and he's been making those since 1986, and it's consistent. There's like 20 of them. Or even an idol of George R.R. Martin's is J.R.R. Tolkien. The R.R. in George R.R. Martin is because of J.R.R. Tolkien. He did that as a homage.
Okay.
It took J.R.R. Tolkien 12 years to write The Lord of the Rings, but he wrote it all. And then he took a span of 3 years to publish them, one after the other. Back in the 50s, when fantasy wasn't a popular genre, and it was a lot harder to do this. So all of that to say, I find George R.R. Martin's legacy as the creator of Game of Thrones is cemented, and he's always going to have the Red Wedding, and he's always going to be the man who made it unsafe to root for your main character because the main character is probably going to die at some point, and he has that. But his legacy as a writer, I find lacking. And I think when push came to shove, he decided that putting in the work to finish these last 2 books before the deadline, the hard deadline he set up for himself in a way, I think he decided that was too hard, and it would be easier to push the problem onto other people and revel in the highlights. And I take a real umbrage with that, and I
want you to write, I must not tell lies.
I really, that is why I hate George R.R. Martin.
Okay. I have a couple things that I want to poke at this with. But let me state up front for everyone, I'm not a Game of Thrones fan. I don't dislike it, really. I watched the first episode. I thought it was good. It was solid. I was like, okay, this is a good show. And then I didn't really feel terribly compelled to like watch the rest. I didn't have HBO at the time. I watched it at a friend's house. I have HBO Now. Stephanie is a huge Game of Thrones fan. She watches it all the way through. I say that at some point I'll probably sit down and watch it. I don't feel overwhelmingly compelled to anytime soon. I actually do have the first book. It was, there was a Kindle sale and it was like $1.99. Here's the first Game of Thrones book. Here's the first book from A Song of Ice and Fire. And I was like, I have $1.99. Let me buy this and I'll read it at some point. I have yet to read it. I'm not a big fantasy person in general. Again, I don't dislike it. I don't have any disrespect for it. Just, generally not where I put a lot of my focus. So that's where I'm kind of coming from on this. I am not a fan. I'm not a hater. I'm just kind of like, okay, that's fine. What I'm interested in dissecting here is, and Andy, let me ask you, what do you feel is a creator's obligation to their audience or their fans?
I feel like...
in general.
Yeah. I feel like the obligation is to entertain, inform, depending on how broad you want to get, but to entertain people or to make them think about a certain thing. The motivation of the Bojack Horseman writer's room was to get people subconsciously or not thinking about existential nihilism and absurdism, but to also laugh doing it. Mm-hmm. I think the motivation of a creator should be to entertain and to finish your work, really, if possible.
Okay. That and that's valid. I'm not going to argue against that. I think that's one of those questions that doesn't really have a right or a wrong answer. I think it just has a personal answer for anyone who consumes any particular kind of art. So I'm a writer. I write. I've been working on a novel. I went to graduate school for writing. I'm a poet. I've published some nonfiction pieces. I like writing. It's fun for me. I will totally admit, if you ever want to just get real annoyed at people complaining about their lives, hop on writer Twitter or poet Twitter and just look at all the people who are like, oh God, I hate writing. Why do I write? Because I hate it so much, because it's everywhere. I loathe that. I think that's terrible. I think if you don't enjoy writing, just don't write. Period. Don't be a writer if you don't think writing is enjoyable, or if you don't get anything out of it, you're just subjecting yourself to misery. I hear this story about how George R.R. Martin came up with this concept and wrote these books. And 5 books over the space of 15 years. So that averages to 3 books, or a book every 3 years, right? Which is, that's good output for a popular writer. I just straight maybe not in the fantasy genre, where the paperback market can really be a huge thing. But he did average. Okay, so for that 15-year period, he averaged a book every 3 years.
Yes.
He didn't stick to that schedule, but he averaged it, and he's going to be 70 in September.
Yes.
What if it's not fun anymore?
That is a very valid question. I in really trying to focus my hate and focus and refine and refract my issue here, I did think about this a lot. It might not be fun anymore. Maybe when he made an agreement with HBO, he either thought that he would be able to finish in time, or he thought that the show wouldn't become what it's become. I don't know that.
Yeah. I'm the first one to admit to you. If I hope that I can publish something that some people will read. I hold no lofty ideas that, I'll be poet laureate, that I'll be a bestseller. I don't write that kind of stuff generally. I always say, if I ever write anything that makes any money, it'll probably be because I occasionally write horror, because people actually pay money for horror. Same thing here. People actually pay money for fantasy. These are genre fiction actually does make some money. It's incredibly hard to break into, but it does actually legitimately make some money. So it's one of the few places where some people can actually make a living from. Not nearly the way it used to be, but it's reasonably possible. I look at something like this. I imagine somebody, who is pumping out these stories. And if I'm almost 70 and I've got this giant project on my shoulders and it's weighing on me and it's difficult and there's huge expectations and I have the opportunity to not? I don't know. I'm not trying to talk you out of your hate. I don't want to make it seem like that.
That's fine.
This isn't like when you talked about esports and I was like, Andy, your hate's dumb.
It'll happen to you.
Which I didn't actually say, and I don't actually think, but it's funny for the purposes of this statement. But I do have to admit, like, I think about writing, and I do have this personal belief that if you don't I legitimately like writing. Yeah, some days are hard. Especially, like, I don't necessarily enjoy editing a whole terrible amount, and that's necessary. I obviously don't enjoy getting rejected when I send stuff out for publication. There's aspects of being a writer that legitimately aren't fun, but the actual act of writing is enjoyable for me. It's fun. I like it. I think about what would I do if I suddenly came into a stupid amount of money, like a lottery winning, or I sell a movie script for $2 million and it never gets made, which is a running gag that I've got going on. And I think, like, what would I do if I didn't have to work? I just, I had all the time I want. Honestly, what I would do is read a shit ton of books, maybe start a band, weightlift, and write books.
Sure.
That is literally what I would do with my day in and day out, because that's the shit that gives my life meaning and enjoyment. Those are my distractions, and that act of creation is really, really pleasurable and enjoyable for me, and I get a lot out of it. If I didn't enjoy writing, maybe because there was a lot of pressure on me, maybe because there's high expectations, maybe because I don't necessarily, one thing I legitimately fear would be if I ever did what Anthony Burgess did. Anthony Burgess writes A Clockwork Orange. Anthony Burgess subsequently spends the next 3 or 4 decades writing really smart, incredible novels that nobody gives a shit about.
Yeah, everyone only remembers A Clockwork Orange.
Oh, it was gorgeousness and gorgeosity made flesh.
Which he wrote in his 20s for, rent money. Imagine that. Imagine if you work your ass off at really incredible works of art. And Anthony Burgess is a brilliant writer. Any of you out there, read some of Anthony Burgess's later novels. They are brilliant. They are better than A Clockwork Orange by a wide margin. And A Clockwork Orange is a great book. I really like that book. But, Anthony Burgess is a brilliant author, and he spent the rest of his career just sitting here going yes, okay, tell me, ask me your 20 questions about Alex from A Clockwork Orange so that we can actually get to my fucking book, please. But he kept doing it because he loved writing. And he kept doing it until he was an old man because he loved writing. I'm sitting here would you be mad if if George R.R. Martin just retired? What if he just was hey, I made all the money I need. I'm having fun. I'm just going to retire. I'm sorry, but I don't have this in me. Or what if he said that, it was taking a toll on his health or something like that?
If he said that, I would completely change my stance. I would absolutely understand. And I'm glad you pitched this up for me so I can bring it up to bat. That would totally change my viewpoint. Or, if in 5-10 years George R.R. Martin in an interview when the whole story's said and done says, I really grew to hate the whole thing after a while, or I loved it when it was a book and I really grew to hate it after it became a TV show. If he said anything like that, my stance would completely change. He hasn't. And I'm only left with the evidence available to me, which is him going on talk shows and him in interviews talking about being the executive producer on the show. And at the same time, if you go to George R.R. Martin's website, one of the first things you'll see on it is an announcement that the book has been delayed and will not be coming out until at least 2019. Interviews of George R. R. Martin saying that, yeah, the manuscript is in my desk somewhere and it's like 2,000 pages at this point, and it's just a lot, and like to bring this into the personal side of it and to draw this into personally, maybe I'm just really butthurt that I talked big game about reading all the books ahead of time and knowing that the Red Wedding was coming before it actually happened, and knowing most of the characters' fates before anyone else did. And I didn't like that got turned around on me as somebody who hasn't been watching the show as it's been coming out, because I staked my claim to the books, damn it. Maybe that's where I'm at, and maybe that's not fair to George R. R. Martin. I don't know what I would have done in his place. I can't honestly sit here and say the morality, the moral writer thing to do is to stay loyal to my book fans and to pump out the books, and because I mean maybe he's worried that'll spoil the ending of the TV show, or I don't know. If he had retired, if he had passed the books off to somebody else and had somebody else write the last 2 books, I'm sure some people would have been upset with that, but I would have been fine with it, because clearly he knew where the story was going. He had to tell the show writers. The story's there. He just didn't put it in book. And now it's too late. Now I don't know if I'm going to read the last 2 books, because by Christmas 2019, the story is going to be over. And you can make the argument that the plot is slightly different, but the broad strokes, the place where all these characters are going to end up, that is supposed to be the same between both TV and book. So I think there's a lot he could have done. Retire, give the books to somebody else, make some sort of statement about his health, and I wouldn't be on his case so much. But it has always grinded my gears ever since, because people kind of saw this coming years ago, and I saw it coming too, and I started to get worried. It really ground my gears to see the guy going on Letterman and laughing about how many sex scenes he's written, and at the same time tweeting out that, hey, the book's going to be delayed.
I'm going to offer you 2 thoughts. I'm going to offer you something that is a bit of a warning and something that I hope will be a comfort to you.
Okay.
And then I'd love your final thoughts before we move on. So my warning to you is keep an eye on the Star Wars fans right now.
Oh, yeah. Jeez.
The idea of what fans are owed because of what something meant to them in the past is beautiful a lot of the time, and so easily made toxic. We don't own the art the way that I think a lot of people seem to feel that we do. And I love Star Wars. I love Star Wars, to quote Mulaney, more than certain dead relatives of mine. And Star Wars is one of the things that helped define me in my upbringing. And I have seen Star Wars through some horrible moments, and I've seen it through some incredible moments, and it has meant so much to me. And when I see what that fandom is in some awful people's hands, it freaks me out. So when you talk about watching George R. R. Martin doing this, that, or the other, think about what people were saying about George Lucas at a certain point. Think about what people are saying about Kathleen Kennedy, Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams. People touching this and what they feel they're owed because of their past with it. So that's my warning. And then my point of comfort is, you say you'd be fine if George R. R. Martin passed this on. I promise you, Andrew. I promise you. If George R. R. Martin dies without finishing these books, someone will go through his papers and someone will finish it. The same way they did with the extended universes of Lord of the Rings after J.R.R. Tolkien's death, the same way they did with Robert Jordan's works, the same way they did with H.P. Lovecraft, the same way they do with tons of these guys. They'll go through the notes, they'll write it. Maybe it won't be the same book George R.R. Martin would have written, but you'll get your books, probably by some fairly competent authors who are hired to do something for the people that they know will buy these books.
Okay. Yeah.
So I offer you that comfort.
Well, thank you for offering me that comfort, and thank you for the warning. I hadn't thought about that. I promise you listeners, I will not be drafting the anti-Game of Thrones manuscript. I will not be putting my name on the declaration to remake the final season of Game of Thrones. Because that
Christ.
shit's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
You do inspire something we can talk about at a later time. My thoughts on the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, and especially the Girl in the Spider's Web, which is the one Stieg Larsson didn't write. But that will be for another time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm down for that. I have not read those books. I did see
books.
I saw the Scandinavian version of the first movie. I never saw the Daniel Craig version, the Daniel Craig Rooney Mara version. I haven't seen that one.
The beautiful, amazing David Fincher directed Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which they released on Christmas Day for some stupid reason and bombed the American trilogy. And I'm gonna hold this in for another hate, but there you go. 2 previews for things Andy has opinions on.
Okay, I'm in.
All right.
You good to
yes,
move on?
This is in what has already become our longest episode, but oh well, it's our podcast. Let's move on to the question.
Suck it, dumb shits. As a Bojack Horseman reference.
All right. I do want to remind people that we are taking questions at our email at lovehaterelationshippodcast at gmail.com. The questions are starting to flow in that way, as opposed to us hunting them down over Facebook or Twitter or Meet Space World. And we have our first email question coming in this week. And here is that. Hey guys, here's my question. A majority of my current friend group is made up of co-workers from my touring company. I love this current setup. I love both working with and doing fun things and creative projects with these people. I've been touring with this company for the past 3 seasons, and though some people have come and gone, a big group of us have stuck together. Unfortunately, I have a new job offer, and my time with the tour might be coming to an end. How can I leave this job but stay friends with these people? They'll be off every weekend next year making new memories and adding friends to the group, surely new employees that I won't know. I've seen a couple of people that I would have once called among my closest friends leave the company, and now are almost completely out of touch with them. We all are. How do I not become one of them? Sincerely, New Yorker who hates new friends.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
Delightful. Andy, you want to take the spearhead on this one, or should I?
Go right ahead, my man.
Okay. So, New Yorker. Right now is arguably the best time to have a problem like this. I know that on the surface, an answer like that may feel unsatisfactory, but I live my life in an interesting way. I still keep, at the very least, very loose touch with so many people that I arguably would not have otherwise. In October, I'm actually going to the wedding of a friend of mine who I literally met when we were 5 years old. We were in the same kindergarten class, played on the same soccer field. We were really, really close friends as small children. Drifted apart a lot in middle school and high school. We saw each other on occasion, would catch up here and there. We haven't talked a whole lot in the last probably decade or so, but through other mutual friends, through very occasional meetups, through Facebook, honestly, a lot of Facebook, we've kept touch. We honestly have. Would I call him my closest friend right now? No. And I don't think he'd be offended by my saying that, but he's been he's been a friend who I've had a very long history with, who I keep loose touch with. And I'm going to his friggin' wedding next month. I've got another friend who I met at a conference 6 years ago. She came to my wedding. She remains a very close confidant of mine. She and I have never been... We've met face-to-face maybe half a dozen times. But we text pretty frequently. We tweet at each other pretty frequently. We tag each other on Facebook constantly. We're in really regular communication with each other. I'd call her a very, very dear friend. Since I moved after graduate school, I have kept ties with a dozen or so really wonderful people who kind of saved my life in graduate school, who were this incredibly close, deep community that I built for myself. Now, here's the thing. I had to make a lot of effort to do that, and they have to make effort to do that. I haven't been able to keep relationships like that with everyone. I've chosen not to with a lot of people. Some people I'm okay with that kind of casual connection. It's just kind of a matter of what you're willing to do and what they're willing to do. Communication is key. Communication, letting them know ahead of time, hey, I sincerely want to keep touch with you. Not in that vague, like, oh, let's keep in touch, but like actually seriously make a point of scheduling things, of making those regular communications. I've got friends who I just have, like, we have Facebook reminders or Google reminders, like, oh, hey, text such and such person just to, like, follow up with them, see how they're doing. Like,
oh, I like that.
There are ways to keep these relationships going, but you have to accept that, A, it might not be reciprocated. And that's not something you should, like, dislike of other people. That's kind of the natural order for a lot of folks. Some people are very good at letting other people go. It's a survival mechanism, or, you know, maintaining some relationships can be exhausting. But if you take active measures, and maybe we can go over a list of those before we close out here. I do want to give Andy a chance to talk. Those measures can be taken. They just can't be taken casually. You don't fall into maintaining long-distance relationships or relationships that with people you don't see very often. Like, it can't be done casually. It has to be done deliberately, with planning, with intention, and with communication on both ends.
Yeah.
So that's my opening salvo.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I can speak to the intentionality part of it by telling a story. Back in high school, I was Mr. Drama Club, and drama was my life.
Nerd.
To the point...
I was with you, no worries.
To the point where if you weren't in the drama club, you weren't my friend, and if we were friends and you decided to stop doing drama, we probably weren't friends after that, because it was so much my life. And the only kind of exception was the people like Alex who graduated and didn't fall in the same bubble in my brain. And so I was very insular with my friendships, and it was very much a proximity thing for me. I was friends with the people I was close with and interacted in my day-to-day with, and not friends with the people that I didn't. And it took going into college and kind of falling out of drama, at least as much as I had been obsessed with it. And it took me getting to be friends with a friend group and going through the struggles of not seeing any given one of them, sometimes for months at a time, and always feeling really guilty about that, and really, it was a real problem for me, until finally somebody said, it doesn't matter how much I see you, it matters how we react with each other when we do hang out. I don't need to see you every week to think you're a great person and be your friend and love on you. And that really stuck with me. So all of that to say, I know where you're coming from, and I think a couple of the other things you can do is, try to re-examine your stance on it. I know you're fearful that you've seen other people leave this touring company and kind of drop off the map. That doesn't have to be your story. That doesn't have to be what happens with you. And yeah, people are going to go off and make new memories and make inside jokes that you're not going to be a part of, but that doesn't prevent you from, in your time that you can spend with these folks, reinforcing your own bonds and connections and such. And you put in the byline, you hate making new friends. I would hope you're going to make some new friends at this new job. I tend to be friendly with at least some of the people I work with, and can count some of them as friends. And I would hope that you would be able to as well, and not just not let it be just business for these people that are going to be in your life.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that you say that, Andy, and I want to build on a point there, which is some of this you will need to be realistic about. You don't go into any great detail about any of the individual friendships you have with any particular members of this group, and that's okay. You don't really need to. But the thing I think about, and the thing I hope you're thinking about as you listen to this, is go through some of those friendships in your head, just person by person. I think you have an instinct for who will maybe be more likely to fall off and who won't be, who might be receptive to regular contact or not regular contact, who you're closer to. The guy I've called my best friend since I was 9 years old, Nick, who was the best man at my wedding, we don't talk sometimes for weeks or months at a time. But I go down to visit, and I will sit in the bed of his truck, we'll open a beer, and it's like we hung out the day before. That's just the relationship that he and I have. Compare that to other person who I've called my best friend since I was 10, David, who we've already talked about here. David and I talk, we text each other every day or every other day. We're communicating all the time. Not to say that if we didn't do that, he and I would fall off, but it's just the kind of relationship that he and I have. You need to look at a lot of these relationships on an individual basis and understand that, I assume you're an adult. I assume these are other adults. Adult relationships are complicated. They fall off. Sometimes they fall off for no one's real fault. Like, people get busy. People aren't great at, texting or keeping touch or meeting up, and that just happens.
Yeah.
So I do hope that you approach this realistically. I don't want you to think it's hopeless. It's not hopeless. It just, again, requires you to have a really level head about it and intentionality. I would totally recommend try and keep touch with everybody. But if somebody falls off, don't let it break your heart, Instead, put that energy to the people who are communicating with you, who are remaining your friends, who are maintaining the relationship, because some of them may surprise you and some of them may end up growing even closer. You never really know until you're in the situation.
Yeah, and I mean, you are in New York, or at least the New York area, unless that was just a purely random nickname. You are in a place where you can hang out at 2 a.m. if you really want to, and go get some pizza, or go to a club, or go to a coffee shop and listen to whatever music is playing. I guarantee you there's music playing at 2 a.m. in a New York coffee shop. Both digitally and personally, you're in a place where it's stuff. There's stuff you can do. There's ways you can hang out with people. There's ways you can keep these relationships. But I think the thing that really is going to help you is by learning and accepting that it is okay if you don't keep all of them. I have a friend who pretty much all of the extent of our reaction ever since she moved out of town is we send each other dog pictures when we see a cute dog. And that's fine.
Yeah.
Alex, you and I were on the same level where we wouldn't talk for weeks, usually months on end. And, we didn't really talk about it, but that kind of bothered me until, something changed. I wanted to bring up this point just because maybe some of these people fall out, eventually. That doesn't mean they're going to stay out of your lives forever.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. We were in a place where we really weren't interacting all that much. And then we hung out, and it was like no time had passed, and we did a thing where now the situation has changed. So I guess what I'm saying, New York, is start a podcast. It really is the garage band of the new age.
You saw that in one tweet, and you've been just dining out on that joke ever since.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. No, I mean, you know what? It could be. You say this is a touring company, so I assume that you're, in some kind of creative situation. If you've got people you can forge a creative relationship with, please, by all means. And if we do want to segue into strategies, that could be a really fun one. You never really know with some of this stuff. If it's a touring company, I don't know if this is a theater company, a music company, a band, I don't know what the situation is, but if you're creatives love to start projects. Maybe they don't finish them, but at the very least they start them.
Maybe it's about the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that really worked for, I think, you and me was the two of us, as well as a number of our other friends, right after Stephanie and I left Orlando, we started a group chat with a bunch of our friends, which, ostensibly was supposed to be about everyone post your adventure of the day. And while that purpose for it has largely fallen off, it worked for a good long while. And we still talk on that thread occasionally. We're still sending messages to each other at least every few weeks, maybe, keeping touch with each other. And that little bit of contact, there's just that little, occasional opening of a window and shouting something at your friend, from across a screen. It keeps some of these relationships alive in a certain way. And when I go down to Orlando, I hang out with you guys. We spend the first hour catching up, and then afterwards it's like I never left.
Just shoot the shit.
It's legitimately we're right back to where we were. Now, granted, this friend group is people who've known some of us have known each other,
decades practically.
Me and Kelly and Stephanie have known each other for 13, 14 years at this point. It's been a bit. Oh God, no! It's almost. Wait, August? I think in August it'll officially be. 14 years. So, but that's a long friggin'. That's basically half of my life that I've known some of these people, and some of you guys came along a little later. Andy, you came along a couple of years later. And that's okay. But the point is, that was one little thing that we did that keeps us connected. And it's a surprising thing. It's not intuitive, but it worked really, really well.
Yeah. I think there is a anxiety throughout a lot of people our age and younger today to start the conversation and to quote-unquote bother my friends with wanting to hang out. And one of the things you can do is take that anxiety and do your best to crumple it up in a ball and eat it and be the one who, reaches out and isn't afraid to reach out.
Yeah, I mean, none of us want to be rejected. I think a lot of it comes down to that.
Yeah.
We don't want to be rejected when we send someone a message and they maybe don't reply back, sometimes for hours or days or at all. We might invite somebody out to something. I'm shit at this. Like, I'm terrible at organizing plans or starting plans or asking people to hang out because I have a crippling fear that they're going to be like, ew, no, you're gross, go away. Because in many ways, I'm still that chubby little shy kid on the playground.
I think that's very true, but I think that's a very good point. And I mean, obviously, the anxiety is there for a reason. No, nobody wants to. The worst thing you can do is try to do this and have it fall flat. But I think it's better to try than not. There's a potential for this to not work, or there is a certainty for this to not work. And like we said before, one of the things you can do is steel yourself that maybe not everybody is going to stay in your friend circle. But I think it's likely, especially that you've already been friends with these people, that at least some of them will be receptive and excited to still be your friend, you know?
And again, just be proactive, you know? I know that, again, to use my lovely wife as an example, she has a good friend who she has a monthly phone date with. This friend lives in a whole nother state, but they talk on the phone once a month, and they've been friends since they were kids. She has another friend who she has like a monthly hangout with. They call it a friend date. And they'll just meet up somewhere and go for a walk or grab coffee or something. And those are relationships that she's very intentional about keeping and keeping up with. And strategies like that sounds kind of hippy-dippy. They sound, well, let's be fair, they sound vulnerable and sincere, which is terrifying. Yeah. It is terrifying to be vulnerable and sincere. And those are the best friendships.
Yeah.
The best friendships are not the ones who you have the most fun with or who always have a great story. Those are good friendships. Those can be very good friendships. The best friendships are the ones where you can express some vulnerability and there's reception there and there is that back and forth. So, you know, if you've got someone who you think maybe even remotely receptive to an idea like that, and that's something you want to invest in, do it, you know? Go do a creative thing or like a fun thing. I think we had an earlier episode where we were trying to give someone advice on making new friends. And we told him things like, God, who was this?
This was...
like we gave him... Oh, yeah, Doogie.
This was Doogie.
We gave him Doogie Howser. We told him, like, start going to, like, trivia nights and maybe play some, like, maybe do some video game stuff and go pursue these interests. If you're in the same town as these people, do that. That sounds like fun. Go do an event, even if it's just, like, regularly going to a karaoke night or a trivia night or just a hang-up where y'all just meet and shoot the shit and drink or have coffee or just chill or go for a walk or go for a run or whatever you all actually enjoy. Just do it, you know, and be intentional about that. Make a Facebook group where all of you are in it and you set up events. Like, be proactive. Yeah. If these relationships matter to you, they're gonna involve effort. And the people who will meet you with that effort are gonna be the best people to keep around, generally.
Absolutely. And I think Alex has put a lot of great stuff out there that I didn't even think about. You know, we live in the social age. Use it to your advantage. Use it to create a space where everybody can talk to everybody else. You know, I know for a fact you are a big theater person. I know for a fact you are a big improv person, and you're in New York, so there's always going to be an improv show to go to.
Oh my God! Why didn't you say it was improv in New York? Like, what day doesn't have an improv night in New York?
Right.
Like, You have too many options.
Right. So there are things you can do, and internally for you, New Yorker, I really want you to hold on to the notion that you don't need to see these people all of the time to stay as good a friend as you are with them.
Absolutely.
So
it's when you're an adult, friendship looks a lot of different ways, and some of those are very surprising. Surprising in their intensity, surprising in their frequency, surprising in ways you can never imagine. And honestly, it just kind of takes being brave enough to take the step forward to try and, take some control of that, but also having the faith that it'll come back to you in some capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really hope this helps. And we will be reaching out to see how you're doing. And I know that you're going to be able to keep these friendships, and I know it's going to work out for you. And with that,
all right.
Congratulations. You made it. You made it, dear listener, to the end of our show. This one has been a marathon. This has been Love-Hate Relationship, and I want to remind everybody again, you can email us your questions at lovehaterelationshippodcast@gmail.com, and we will promise that as long as it is about a relationship, we will happily answer it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can also tweet us at LHR Pod. That's LHRPOD. With any of your questions, and you can follow us there to keep up with new episodes. And I have to say, I am very proud of that Twitter feed. At least once a day, I put up something that I legitimately find funny, and I hope that you assholes also find it funny.
Yes, we're big on Twitter, and we love the Twitter, and we would love to see you on Twitter. You can also find us at our website, lovehaterelationship.net. You can find us at all of the places Alex mentioned at the beginning of the show. You can follow me, Andy Boel, at JovoCop2113 on Twitter.
And I'm A_X_RUIZ on both Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me on both. I am just as funny on my Twitter, and my Instagram is mostly weightlifting videos and pictures of me and my wife drinking. So it's quite enjoyable, I must say.
Quality content all around.
Jesus, I need to go to bed. Okay. Thank you for listening, everyone. And as always, please, please, please tell your enemies. As do I.